We're live. Hello, everyone.
We
This is, oh, sorry. I keep talking over Pamela. Pamela,
it's
do you want to?
okay. I'm just gonna say we are sitting at $5,817.
Yes.
So
Oh,
this is
love watching the numbers go up.
yeah, this is absolutely amazing. And please help us get to 10K so that we can get Allie a new computer when they come out.
Yes. New computer.
All right, now I'm gonna hand it to you, madly
Okay.
tweet and stuff like that.
Then Pamela will be back later. We are in hour 17 of 26. And this hour, we are going to be discussing the CosmoQuest community's favorite science fiction. So I think it would be good to start with just going around and everyone just quickly introduce yourself and tell us some of your like favorite sci-fi TV, books, movies. What are you like really into in this moment?
I'll go first. Um, so I'm Gordon, and I've been, I can remember reading sci-fi books that my dad had when I was a little kid. And we're talking about Asimov and Heinlein and Herbert and all of the classic early sci-fi authors. Um, so I think I have read most of Heinlein. I won't profess to have read all of Asimov, but I think I've read all of the wildly inaccurately named Foundation trilogy. Um, but I fell in love with Douglas Adams's work, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, um, and I've also read a lot of Gibson, William Gibson, Neil Stevenson, and even Dennis Taylor, who is the author of the Bobiverse, and he was on the first. I think he was on the first Hangout-a-thon, or was it the first CosmoQuest con that we did?
And
One of our panelists.
Con,
in case somebody
CosmoQuest
missed
Con.
it, there's a new book in the Bobbyverse that came
Oh
out
yeah,
about a month ago,
I've
and
heard that.
I found it fascinating. I thought it was really good.
And I
So I
think
mean, sorry,
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to say like those aren't the only authors I've read. There are so many of the original. I think of them as sort of the original modern sci-fi authors because of course you can go back in sci-fi back to Jules Verne, for example.
Mhm.
But um, these are sorts of the authors that I really I've really enjoyed. I think that Douglas Adams has been he's one of the most influential sci-fi authors in the 20th century. Like you find his stuff everywhere,
Mhm.
references, and people don't even know that they're referring to him at this point
And
in
his
some
sense of
cases.
humor is just
Yes.
so distinctive and has influenced so much that has come after him.
Yes.
And
Also, as someone who's read it in two languages, I can assure you that the it it doesn't translate. Like you have to read it in the original English because he plays with the language so much.
Yes.
humor is like one of the hardest things to translate between languages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it doesn't work in the German version either. Absolutely not. It reads like a child's book or something.
I'm I started learning Italian. I started doing it on Duolingo last November, and sometime in the spring, I bought a copy of the complete, all five books of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in Italian, and I'm not very far into it, and yeah, it's I can see I can see the story, and they've done a reasonably good translation, I think, but I
It's a
still need
really
to
good
read it.
way to learn another language though, because like when I was
Yes.
in Korea, I bought Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in Korean, and because I knew it so well, that reading it like I knew what it was supposed to say, and then reading it, like my Korean got so much better working through that book. But I mean, it was like it took me like at the beginning, I basically read a page a day. That was about as much as I could do.
Yeah.
Like by the end, I could actually like read it. So
Oh, that's awesome. Does anyone else want to share their favorite sci-fi?
I can go because I might not make it the whole hour.
Okay.
It's 9 p.m. on a Sunday night, and a busy week coming up. So, um, but yeah, I'm Jillian. Since I used to be streaming a lot, but that's been a few years at this point. I don't even know how many. Um, and yeah, so right now I don't have time to read or do anything because I just moved to Dubai in the last 6 months, and setting up a new life in a new country, and a new city is no joke. So I don't have time to read. But I opened, and actually I opened my Goodreads to just remember books that I've read in anticipation for this panel, and it made me really sad because there's a lot of books in my want to read. But anyway, um, so I think kind of going through the list, like S.K. Dunstall, the Stars Uncharted series, I really, really loved. And they have a new, I think it's a duo, and they have a new series called the Linesman series, which is also really, really good. I don't know if it counts as sci-fi, but the Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer is all these kind of
Okay.
like futuristic, twisted fairy tales, and
Yeah,
it's
we define sci-fi like very, very loosely, like sci-fi, spec fic, whatever you want to call it.
yeah. So the Lunar Chronicles are great. Becky Chambers is really great, but particularly I really, really loved Psalm for the Wild Built. Just loved it, loved it, loved it. Um, I know terrible person, but Ender's Game has been one of my favorite books.
Yeah, I think that's a really like formative one for a lot of people, and
Just
it was
like
for me too. And I've like
formative is one of
struggled.
the words. There's still stuff in there that like when I read it, I'm just like I recognize it. Like there's so much in it that I recognize, and some of the journeys and just everything. It's just such an incredible, really an incredible book. So let's see. The Past is Read by Catherine Valente, and that's really good. I do a lot. There's a lot of supernatural sort of. Oh, Catherine Valente, speaking of her, Silently and Very Fast is about an AI, and that's really, really, really incredibly well written, as everything and anything that she writes. It's just really, and kind of speaking of the originals, like it wasn't more of the sci-fi book, but Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury is
Oh,
kind
yeah,
of
that's
another
one of
one of those formative books that I read it and I was just like, what just happened to me?
I am still very, very into Ray Bradbury's work. Like just I grew up reading him. Like I grew up with my mom reading me Ray Bradbury short stories as like bedtime stories when I was a little kid, which I don't know if that's really thing to do. Some of those stories are pretty dark. Um, but that's how I got my love for sci-fi. And
Yeah,
it's just
Dandelion Wine is still one of those books. And then again, I don't think it really counts as sci-fi, but just if on the topic of books that sort of haunt you, because Dandelion Wine was a book that haunted me. The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman is another just one of those books that really haunts me. Every time I read it, I'm just like I didn't remember any of what happened in the book, and then I read it, I'm like, okay, I need to go sit down for a few years.
anyone else want to jump in? And also, this isn't limited to just books. Like we can talk about movies, TV shows.
Yeah, so I think I'll go. My affair with sci-fi started fairly early. Like one of my earliest memories is watching the premiere of The Next Generation, which ages me, I guess. But yeah, I was 3 years old and living in the States at the time. And I remember watching television with my brother, and he told me, yes, what we're going to watch is a new a new show about it used to be an older show that people really loved, and then now it's coming back as a different thing, and my 3-year-old brain couldn't really parse that. But as soon as I saw the amazing visual of the Starship Enterprise D just separating in space with the trumpets and the music, it just burnt into my brain, and I've been a Trekkie ever since. Uh, that was like, talk about formative moments. Like I can trace back to the second I became not just a science fiction fan, but a space fan. That single experience turned me into space. And I was 3 years old. We were living in Kansas at the time, and a couple of months later, my parents took me to Florida, and I was way more interested in going to the Kennedy Space Center than I was to Disneyland, apparently. And unfortunately, there are no photos, but I've been told that I just stared at the rockets and just walked around like a. And no, but and later when I learned to read, I found a bunch of books in my house. We had a pretty big library, and I found a bunch of books, all translated to Hebrew. So I don't remember any of the names because I it didn't register because I read it in Hebrew at the time. But I do remember that there was a lot of Heinlein there, a lot of um, some names. I don't remember the names exactly, but I specifically remember Heinlein because I really loved his stuff at the time. Um, some of it I don't remember. I just remember the plots. I don't remember the stories, the names. I just remember the plots.
Mhm.
Like there's one, and I've brought this up in chat. I think a year ago, and somebody mentioned the name to me, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. I'm gonna read it again," and I completely forgot. There's a story where somebody joins not I don't remember if it's the military or like a mining company on a dare, and he wakes up on a lake in, I think, Venus, and there are crocodiles there. It's something weird, and he has a ring. There's underground tunnel. If anybody knows what I'm talking about,
On the diagonal, might he usually like has us with these things.
yeah, so that's like one of the earliest books I remember reading, and I was like, oh wow, this is interesting. Like there are whole worlds here.
I think that's the Green Hills of Earth.
That could be, yeah. That the name rings a bell in maybe how they translated it rung a bell. I don't know. I'll take a
Yeah.
look. Thank you. No, so there are tons of sci-fi books. I don't remember the names, and I read some of them in retrospect were kind of iffy. Like I mentioned this in chat the other day. I read when I was like 13, I think. I read the entirety of Battlefield Earth by L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh goodness.
And as a 13-year-old, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah, of
But
course.
then I tried reading it again at 18, and halfway through I was like, "Oh my God, what was I thinking?"
I think we could all like I think we could spend an entire panel discussing like the things that we read and watched as teenagers that haven't aged well, let's say.
I think it hasn't aged well by the time I read it, but
Yeah.
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 But so yeah, so I loved reading sci-fi, and I loved sci-fi on television, on movies. I watched all the classics. Uh, And in later years, I lost the ability to actually sit down and read, so I'm only listening to audiobooks now. And I kind of cheated. I took Jillian's advice and opened my Goodreads history to see what I've been reading, and I really enjoy Andy Weir. I think.
Mhm.
I think if you're talking contemporary, he has some good stuff. I read listened to rather after the TV show, listened to the entirety of the Expanse book series. And while I do think that the TV show does some things better, I think that the scope of the book series is,
Mhm.
I mean, they go further, they go they go longer. So I don't know. Maybe if they had a couple more seasons, they would have gotten there.
I
But
I will admit that I struggle with the book. Like, I've only read the first book of the
mhm.
Expanse series. I have the whole thing because my lovely mother-in-law like gave me. She has all of the Expanse books and she just gave them to me. Um, and I keep wanting to read them, but I've seen 5 out of the 6 seasons of the show, and then I
Mhm.
found out that Kamina Drummer, my absolute favorite character, is not in the books.
Well, she is and she isn't.
I know she's a composite
She's a
character.
composite, yeah.
Yeah, but
No,
like,
Camila Drummer is definitely, I think, like, and if you've listened to the podcast, to the official Expanse podcast, the two writers repeated a lot that that's one character that was born out of the actress because
mhm.
they brought her in for like one of the background characters and she was so good they just had to include her. So they just went, okay, let's take this character from the book and this character from the book and give
And
it to her.
that's one thing I love about like watching The Expanse and then reading the books is because the two authors of the books were also like the head writers for the show.
Yes.
And
And I
so
think it benefits both.
you get to see them making changes and like assessing what they did in the book and what they would like to do differently in the show. Like you get to see like that kind of
Yeah,
how that plays out when you have like the author adapting their work for TV.
exactly.
And like
I think,
I love that so much.
yeah, like when an author adapts their own work, they can improve on it and they can, and
Mhm.
specifically, I think they had and they keep saying that they were surrounded by the right people, but I think they also probably have their own idea of what works best on book and what works best on screen. And a lot of the things that work on screen wouldn't have worked as well on the book. And I think having watched the series first and listened to the books later, it kind of helped me visualize some of the maybe more um, like the action oriented stuff, which is
Yeah.
really hard to explain in words.
Now
Um,
that's probably like The Expanse, the TV show, like I haven't loved a sci-fi TV show that much since Babylon 5.
yeah,
So
and I think the Expanse does something which Babylon 5 did that to a degree as well, is that they pay close attention to stuff that only space nerds will notice.
yeah,
And Babylon 5 did
with
that a
how
bit
yeah,
with
and I
the
mean it had to like also Babylon 5 was limited by the technology of the time,
yeah.
right?
And like
Which
it's
like
something that they completely don't have to do. It's something that like the
mhm.
average viewer would never have noticed
Oh, I know.
that
I
what
got so excited the first time I watched The Expanse and you see like the one of the ships coming in for a landing and
yeah.
it turns and goes thrusters first down to the
Yeah.
ground.
Or
And I
small stuff like the guy pouring the
love that.
drink and seeing the Coriolis
Yeah,
effect.
and I
Like,
also like I love that you have they take like the difference in gravity, right, on Mars and out in the belt and on the moon and show how that causes the cultures to develop
yeah.
and how people's bodies change over
Yeah.
time. And it's just like there's so much thought put into that that's really,
That's the thing
really
that a lot
neat.
of that was in the books, but
Oh yeah.
the small stuff like the Coriolis effect, it wasn't in the books. It doesn't need to be, but it's such a small detail that somebody went, this is for the space nerds. And I
Mhm.
think that's what eventually saved the show because love him or hate him, Jeff Bezos is a space nerd.
Yeah. And
Uh,
I oh God, I still need to watch the last season of the show.
yeah,
Um, because just I really enjoyed the first book, Leviathan Wakes. It was complicated for me. I have never had a reading experience like that where I loved the story and was just so into the story and could not stand the point of view characters.
yeah.
I found Holden and Miller to be incredibly irritating. Um, and so it took me a year to read that book because I'm like, the story is so good, the writing is so good. I just personally do not like these characters who are telling the story.
Yeah.
And so it was just this really, really frustrating reading experience for me. But like I stuck with it. I was also because I'd seen the TV show and I get to the book and I'm like, Bobby and Christian are not in it, are not in the first
Yes,
book. And I just felt I was
but
like, but they're in the
the
second book. I know,
they're in
I
the
know.
second book, and in the audiobook, the narrator, whose name is Muse, something. I'll remember in a moment. He's an amazing actor. I've seen him in other stuff, like not just as a voice actor. Um, he does an amazing job with all the voices. Like,
Oh,
and
I'll
when he
have to
gets
check
to
that out.
Avasarala, you're just, it's 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 delightful. Um, so yeah, so I've been listening to a lot of stuff. Having like my last reading spurt, let's call it. I started with Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which after Artemis, I was not expecting much, and I fell in love with the story with Project Hail Mary. It's just so um, wholesome in a way. And after
I
that, I needed more wholesome stuff. So I re-listened to the Bobbyverse, which also has the same wholesome vibe. And then in a
Psalm for the
complete
Wild Built, by the way, like I don't
Mhm.
know if you've read it, but Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers is super wholesome. And it's like it is so genuinely like sweet. It's like the only like word that I can think of for that book. And
Songs
it's
of the Wild Bills.
Psalm for the Wild Built.
I'll have to check that
Put it
out. And I think in a couple
Song,
of
oh,
hours
I
we're
found it.
actually going
Yeah.
to do a panel where we're going to like build a sci-fi literature syllabus for people who may not be familiar with sci-fi.
Hmm.
So I'm hoping that a lot of y'all can come back for that since
Yeah.
we're like all just going in on the books. Uh,
So one final thing I read and I
mhm.
want to recommend because I've talked enough already.
It's all good.
Not a feel-good book. Like I had absolute whiplash when I listened to that after the last Bobbyverse.
Mhm.
It's speaking of The Expanse, it's by the same two authors, their new book series. It's called The Mercy of the Gods. That's the name of the book. The series they're calling The Captives War. It's very depressing, but it has one of the best, I think, alien invasion scenes I have ever experienced in fiction. Like I was listening to it when I was walking home to I was walking to work and I had to sit down and to take it in because it was so like spoiler alert, there's an alien invasion, but the
Mhm.
invasion was just so wow. It was I've not
I will
experienced
have to
something
put that on my
that
list.
intense.
I
I had
unfortunately haven't read a lot of contemporary sci-fi. Sorry, go ahead.
I had an experience sort of like that. I was reading Mary Norris Russell's The Sparrow, which is an alien first contact book, but it takes it from a perspective I've never seen anywhere else. And it is beautiful and it is devastating. And I was in a very intense part of the book, having been reading it while flying from Chicago to London. And I had to make it from London Heathrow on the underground to the train station that Harry Potter made famous. And I'm on the London Underground reading this book, openly crying, and I could not stop. And
Oh, no.
like I periodically got like the little ladies and then the men trying to ignore. And it's like, I'm fine. I'm just reading a book and really jet lagged. And I'm sorry. Yeah, so if you need a book to tear you apart, Mary Norris Russell's The Sparrow.
Sometimes we just need a good book to do that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Just get the catharsis.
The Doomsday book by Connie Willis is another one that does that.
Hmm.
This one I cried not in public, slightly better. Um, it's a time travel book, and it again will just completely devastate you, give you new perspectives, open you up to ideas. I apparently like that now and then in my fiction. So those are the two I would contribute. And I have to
The
say,
last
Ender's
paragraph.
Game. I keep finding myself in Ender's Game too. I'm with you, Jillian.
Yeah, and Ender Shadow, both of them actually. Um, but I was gonna say, speaking of endings that just devastate you, it's not sci-fi, but The Book Thief, by Martin Zuzak. The last paragraph of The Book Thief is potentially one of the most beautiful pieces of writing that I've ever read. And like, if you've read the whole book and you get to that last, like literally, just like it gets me every time. I've read it like 3 or 4 times.
You are muted, Pamela.
This is getting recorded on YouTube, and I will be going back and adding in show notes that list all these books out.
That'll be awesome.
Oh, and I think we'd be remiss if we're talking about contemporary authors if we didn't mention. Now I'm blanking on the name. Hold on, let me find it. Da, 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 da. He's the guy who writes short stories. Ted Chiang.
Oh, Ted Chiang is amazing.
He's amazing.
Yes.
He writes one book a decade, but he has the ability to write a short story that by the time you finish it, you felt like you read an entire novel.
Exhalation basically made me rethink my views on the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, I discovered him like many people through Arrival, which, if we're going to jump mediums for a moment, I think is one of my favorite sci-fi movies.
I still need to watch that. I hear so many good things about it.
It's incredible, even if you just consider the cinematography alone is incredible. But it's based on a really good story and it touches on really good themes and it's a very interesting take on First Contact. I remember coming out of the cinema and going, this is the most interesting take I've seen on First Contact since Contact, which is my all-time favorite movie.
You're talking about The Arrival, right? Arrival?
I think it's just Arrival.
Yeah, Arrival. Yeah. Same. I remember watching that, just really not knowing what I was getting into.
Yeah.
And then hitting the plot twist in the middle and being like, hang on a minute. And then the rest of the movie, I was just like, I didn't sign up for this. Like, this wasn't what I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that because he said about endings that hit you hard, and I was like, wow, that's one of them. And basically, almost any Ted Chiang story is the same. Like they all have that twist that once you get to it, you're like, oh.
So we've talked a lot about books. What do we think about like movies?
Before we move on, can I mention a couple of books myself? I haven't had a chance to step in, and then I'll transition us to movies or TV shows.
Sure.
I want to make a push for. I think it's The Miracle Visitors is the one I'm thinking of. I may have the title wrong. It is a first contact story that does not read like any other first contact story you're going to read. And I will double check on that afterwards and let Pamela know, so it goes into the notes whether I'm remembering the right title.
You've got the right title.
But it's one of those that just leaves you devastated at the end because of a twist ending that you do and don't see coming all at the same time. It is just devastating for any fan of sci-fi. No one's mentioned Wells here, and H.G. Wells was one of the first authors I read who I found out, he wrote a lot of stuff, and it's gathered together into compendia where you can read 5 novels in a single volume.
Oh,
and
yeah, absolutely. I've
Yeah.
read all of H.G. Wells. I think like as much as
I
I love
can't.
the classics, though, I also love like hearing about like new stuff, like stuff that's been published in the last
Yeah, I
like
don't think I can say I've read all of H.G. Wells, though I know a place where they are currently digitizing his 19 volume complete works with the short stories and everything.
I guess what I mean, well, I've read all of his novels. I haven't really dug into his short stories, but I also like my favorite because I'm a little weirdo is the Island of Dr. Moreau. Um, I just love it
That
because creepy.
that has race tension things in it that make me so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love fiction that makes me uncomfortable. If you want to read a really good riff on that book, hold on. The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Sylvia Moreno Garcia is a really, really great take on it that does actually address the racial issues and is also a very feminist take on it. And it's just it takes all the themes and the body horror of the Island of Dr. Moreau and kind of puts a more like modern, culturally aware spin on it.
War of the
Uh,
Worlds is the one that I think of his that has aged the best. And
Hmm.
there's a reason it's been made into, I think it's 6 movies at this point, though most of them are not worth ever looking for. It's one of the few sci-fi novels that I do pick up and read every few years. It's not very long. It is incredibly good. It is full of concepts and critiques of uh, the British Empire and humanity and religion and so many other things, all in one really intense, well written first person perspective story.
mhm.
Uh, see, if I'm going to pick one other book, I'm going to suggest Stanislav Lem's Solaris.
I love Solaris, and finding an English translation of Solaris that's actually good is so hard. There's currently only like one direct from Polish to English translation available, and it
Mm-hmm.
is only through Amazon. It's only digital through Amazon because Amazon scooped up the rights to it. And the other translations that are out there are like English translations of a French translation
Mm-hmm.
um, of Solaris. But like, oh, it's such a good book. But and also the movie,
Which
I
movie?
heard it's
the
intense.
The George
the
Clooney English movie or the
no,
original
the
Soviet
Russian, the
movie?
Soviet
You're right.
The
movie,
Russian, yeah,
Yeah.
I heard it's intense.
It is intense, but
the
it's also
Tarkovsky
of a
movie.
different era.
Yeah.
So if you're used to modern era sci-fi, I know some people I've shared it with have said, "Oh, this is just so long and ponderous." Well, yes, it is, but there's a reason it's long and ponderous. It's very
It's
introspective.
And
yeah, and I think I
if you
sorry, go.
like British movies where there's a lot of and looking at each
It's very
other,
like that.
yes.
It's
So that
yeah.
Eddie Izzard sketch of what British movies are. Sorry, Allie, I almost
No,
got you.
no, I yeah, she broke me because I love Merchant Ivory movies. I
Yeah,
love British movies where nothing happens. Remains of the Day is one of my favorite movies. Anyway, I
I,
think that that's why like I can sit there for 3 hours and watch
What did you think of
Solaris.
The Lighthouse?
I haven't seen The Lighthouse.
I think it's
anyways,
right up your alleys.
Solaris is the sci-fi version of that genre, and it is brilliant.
And
And
it also just has beautiful visuals
yeah,
and I love Tarkovsky. Like I definitely recommend if you have never been exposed to like I would say like 1970s Soviet cinema, like definitely look into that because it's different. It's just so different, like the storytelling conventions and what they do with visuals, especially in like the sci-fi movies. And Tarkovsky just gets really weird with it. And that's why like I love the 1972 Solaris film. And I am hoping to make it through the English translation of the novel at some point.
And since we were wanting to transition to movies, I'm going to give 3 movies that are all very different from each other, that are all sci-fi, that will all appeal to someone in some way. First, the least known of these, Dark Star, which is a John Carpenter dark comedy about a group of space destruction crew who travel out to make space safe for colonization by blowing up unstable planets. And it is incredibly full of satire, tongue-in-cheek, and was one of the ones that was sort of a precursor to Douglas Adams in a number of ways.
Is the
Without
premise
giving too much away, this is one where they have artificially intelligent explosive devices that they drop to destroy their planets. And at one point, a technical glitch happens, and they have to talk the bomb down because it is attached to the ship and it is going to go off.
Okay, so sort of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy meets Red Dwarf?
Sort of. And
I
like
need
I
to
say,
watch
it is
that.
it is John Carpenter's first film. It is goofy, it is silly, and also in some ways kind of deep, but it is just completely different from most things you'll see in sci-fi cinema, and that's one reason I recommend it. And then one of my favorite movies ever, Cloud Atlas. I don't know if anyone here has heard of that movie. It is one of the most ambitious films ever made.
Amazing. Some of the best storytelling that has ever been done on film. Like it is a 3 hour, again, it's one of those that made me rethink my view on the entire universe, but like it's a 3 hour investment. It is like it just from a storytelling perspective. Like I don't know how they did it. The way that the stories are told and how it's like 6 different stories in 6 different genres cut together in one journey that takes you all the way from the start to it's absolutely amazing.
And it's got actors like Tom Hanks, Halle Berry,
Hugo Weaving,
Jim Broadbent. I mean, people you will recognize, and maybe a few characters. Ben Whishaw is in this, and it's just insane how they did this. Just the people who scheduled shooting must have been insane to agree to do this. And you'll understand once you get partway through. But this is a movie. This is one of only 2 movies I can say this with. When I reach the end of the movie, and I watch it at home on television, on video, the moment I finished the movie, I said, I have to watch this again right now. I then realized, wait, I have to go to the bathroom and eat something. And then I came back and I watched that 3-hour movie again right away. It is that much of an impression.
I had the opposite experience with it.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I didn't like it. I really enjoyed it. But when I finished it, I was like, okay, I have no idea what just happened. I'm just gonna let it sink in because I I didn't so much follow the plot as I just connected with the atmosphere because it's a very atmospheric movie. And when it ended, I needed to digest it. And I think I said, okay, I'm probably going to need to watch this again. And I never have, which I think might be overdue. I think I should. But I do remember when I finished, I was like, okay, that was something I need to sit on for a while.
And the third final movie I'll mention before I just let someone else go is District 9.
Yep.
South African
really
sci-fi film, again, first contact, but in a very different sense from what you'll probably see in almost any other situation for multiple reasons. And
it's very much an apartheid allegory.
Yep.
So
I'm gonna just like leave you guys, but I'm gonna and like get on my way to going to bed. But before I leave, in terms of like I don't watch a lot of stuff at all, at any time, generally. But a few years back, I was studying David Tennant just because I think he's just a really incredible actor. And so I was watching the stuff of his that I can watch because he does a lot of like crazy, like scary stuff, and I don't watch scary stuff. But I was watching I watched all of the episodes that he did of Doctor Who, and I wasn't expecting real. I didn't know what to expect. And I watched the first episode and I was just like, this is so weird, and it's not super like, really low like CGI, and the aliens are very strange, and it's just like I was like, this is such a weird show. And then like I kept watching it, and there's episodes in there um what Ambius was saying, where I finished them and I was just like, why? It's like the most, like a complete existential, just there was one or two episodes that David Tennant did as the 10th Doctor, I guess, that they were so profound in just the weirdest ways, but just so profound that I just finished them. I was just like, I don't know what happened. The universe is like, I was like, I need to quit for like a day or two, and deal with this experience. But yeah, I haven't watched any of the other Doctors, so I don't know really. I can't say too much about the whole series, but yeah, the 10th Doctor of Doctor Who.
Doctor Who has that quality which was very common in the 90s, by the way, where you could have 1 week with an episode that's pure camp. It's just a complete romp, and the next week you're going to have an existential crisis.
It just
That's
like
why
comes
I
up
love
behind
Star
you.
Trek DS9.
Yeah, it just comes up behind
Yeah,
you and it goes boom. It's just like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And with Star Trek, it happened for, I don't know if that's the same reason it happens in Doctor Who, but with Star Trek, one of the reasons that happens, and I know it happened with a lot of series in the 90s because of the same reason, it was syndication, where
Yeah.
there was no guarantee that the episodes would air in a certain order.
Hmm.
So you could have those whiplashes, and you
Yeah.
could go
And
from having a comedy 1 week and a
mhm.
political commentary the next one.
It's honestly nice while I'm watching DS9 for people just joining us. Like, I'm a huge Trekkie, but for whatever reason, um skipped DS9 as a kid, and I'm currently in the middle of watching it for the very first time and having a blast. If you follow me on social media, you get to read all my weird thoughts and shit posts about it. Um, but I love that because like DS9's overall story is very dark and it's very intense and very full of all this social and political commentary it's stressful. It's good, but it's stressful. And so I love that you'll have one of those like very existential, like just smack you upside the head episodes, followed by a goofy holosuite romp. And I love wacky holodeck episodes. That is like my favorite genre of Star Trek episode. I would watch a whole season of them.
Thing
Um,
is, I love them on DS9. I hate them on TNG. It's a completely different, like, I don't know why.
because DS9 is just so it's like it's like Star Trek unhinged. I
Yeah.
don't know how to describe it other than
It's
that.
Star Trek gone rogue, really.
Yeah.
Also, they were
It's
also
less
very
formal.
good on Voyager. Voyager used the holodeck in really wacky ways,
The
which
Oh my
they,
God, yeah. Like Tom Paris's whole like Captain Proton stuff, if we want to talk about
the
like
Captain
pulp sci-fi
Proton,
reference.
yeah, like that was just like being, that was very meta, I
It's
think.
so and it's so much fun to see like actors get to chew the scenery, and I don't think you get that in a lot of these more like, short season prestige TV shows.
Yeah.
And also what I love about like the episodic TV shows, sci-fi TV shows of the 90s is you get all these kind of side quests and like digressions and that have nothing to do with the main story, but they add texture to the characters and they make you
Yes.
emotionally invested in the characters. So when the show really like puts the character through the ringer, you care about them and you're more affected because
Yeah.
you've been on like wacky holodeck romps with them or like seen them like pouring their heart out to someone at the bar, like
And I
I
think
think
that's what
that's one of
Strange
the
New
reasons.
Worlds has been. Sorry.
Yeah, You're saying exactly what I was about to
Oh,
say about
okay.
Brave New Worlds.
Yeah. Strange New Worlds has been doing exactly that. And I think that's why it was so well received, because it went back to the formula of bye, Jillian. Went back to the
Bye.
formula of sure, there might be a background story, but
Yeah,
it's and it goes so many places. Specifically in the second season, they were like, we are going, they went the also something which was common in the 90s. We're going to attack every genre out there and just play with it.
oh yeah, Star Trek Voyager did an entire season where they just riffed on like cheesy tropes, like cheesy genre fiction tropes.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun. And I wish I could, it's like season 3 or 4 that does that.
I hate how
Um,
every TV show these days is 8 episodes a season.
yeah. And it's like you can tell, like I do love that format of basically having like an 8 hour movie, right?
Yeah.
It's neat. You can dig into stories,
And
but
the
I
production
also,
value is about
yeah.
10 times better than it used to be.
And
So
but I
it's
also just I miss 90s mid-budget sci-fi. Like,
Stargate.
Yeah, I was
Stargate
gonna.
SG-1 did exactly that in exactly that time slot where
Yep.
they didn't mind having some fun with the format and the tropes. And
mhm,
there are some absolutely hilarious episodes alongside some that make you think and a few that just break your heart.
yeah.
Yep.
And
And it's not
SG-1,
exactly sci-fi, but Xena is something I used to watch a lot as
I
a
love
teenager.
Xena.
And it was just that you had comedy episodes, you have drama episodes, you had a lot of it was very campy, it was very self-aware, it played with tropes, it lampshaded tropes, like it was very it also Xena had the thing that a lot of shows at that time were kind of dealing with, which was the emergence of fandom on the internet.
Hmm.
And a lot of shows didn't really address it. I know that Babylon 5 was one of the shows that did because
Yes, that's how Babylon 5
Straczynski,
was
yeah,
able to stay on the air, is that
Straczynski
Straczynski
was
would,
on the it wasn't BBS board, it was the Usenet boards.
yeah.
And with Xena, what happened was that they started sort of like referencing the fans, and at some point they let one of the most prominent fan fiction writer of the fandom just write a couple of episodes,
Oh my God.
and they are considered some of the best episodes of the show. But and that's something that I think you see in these late 90s, early 2000s shows. You see that transition. And I
Hmm.
think, and I'm surprised we haven't I'm surprised we haven't mentioned it, but I think the change happened right around Battlestar Galactica. The
Oh yeah, the
I think
reboot.
that was the first
The
show of the
reboot.
new, even
The
though it
reboot.
still had 20 episodes and it still had like a full season, it felt like something new. And I think it set the tone, I think, for the next
And
decade or
that
decade
is
and a
one of
half
those
of
shows.
sci-fi.
I love the reboot Battlestar Galactica. I have tried to rewatch it, and it's very depressing.
It
Yes.
it
And
was
not just
post
depressing, it's
9/11.
bleak. Like,
Yes.
yeah, I got to like really dig into it in a college class, um, about like looking at like post 9/11 media and like how 9/11 changed the just story, how we tell stories
Yeah.
in the US. And Battlestar Galactica is like a really solid example of that.
Yeah.
And it's good for the most part.
I think
But
that's one of the things where tragedy changes the global um I don't know what's the word, like it changes how, like it's basically what you said, it's how it changes how we write, how we
mhm,
consume media, what type of media we want. And you can see it in shows that, like I've read, it's been written a lot about how in many shows that ran through 9/11, you could see the sudden change of tone, the sudden change of, going back to Star Trek, for example, they they started shooting Enterprise right
Yeah,
around
no, I
9/11.
remember when Enterprise did that really like hard shift
And then
to,
they made a hard shift into there was a huge basically terrorist attack on Earth, and that like was the next 2 seasons was just them dealing with that.
yeah, and I think that was around the time that I like noped out of Enterprise because I was just
Which
like, I don't.
is I it's a shame because I think that's when Enterprise really started getting
Yeah, that's what I've
not just
heard.
good. I'm one of the people who actually like the first 2 seasons of Enterprise because it focuses on exploration. It focuses on the wonder of exploration. And then it turns the last 2 seasons, which people say are better, just turns into like yeah, let's have another season long
Mhm.
arc. And
I have been
but
oh sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, but like that shift did allow them to turn more into what Star Trek I think should be about, into reflecting. They were like, okay, how do we deal with racism in a post 9/11 uh, world where
Hmm.
people are upset and people have trauma, but it causes them to, on the other hand, do stuff and behave in ways that maybe aren't right. And that was something that Star Trek wasn't afraid to put a light on
Hmm.
in 2003, which was for a lot of people was still too soon. But and I think that's what Star Trek does best. Star Trek is shouldn't be afraid of addressing social issues.
Hmm.
And it
And
never has, and I think it should never be in the future.
yeah, I'm considering revisiting Enterprise because like I have tried to get into DS9 for years and just for whatever reason it never clicked with me. And it frustrated me because so many people I know and whose opinions I respect like love it, right? And so I'm just like, what is wrong with me? Why is this just not clicking with my brain? And then I decided to give it another shot a few months ago. And yeah, that was finally the right time for me for whatever reason. And that's a Star Trek I said I was never going to be interested in, and now I'm over here like obsessed with it. So it's like maybe I should give Enterprise a second chance. Who knows?
I
5 years from
recently
now, I might
went and
actually get into it.
I recently went and rewatched Enterprise. I loved it the first time, but I wasn't sure if I'd caught every single episode. It turns out I hadn't, but I still got a lot out of it the second time. There are some great performances. There is fan candy sprinkled throughout the series, and
Yes.
it it got a lot of pushback for its early episodes and a few bad episodes here and there, which happens in early seasons
Mhm.
because I think they lean too hard on certain things at the beginning that thankfully went away as the series went on, particularly the emphasis on people with their clothes off in the decon chamber. That
Oh my.
was leading on that was
Yeah.
a bad move.
Okay,
But they
so
were on the
I
heels of Voyager and Seven of Nine and deciding, ooh, sex makes it
You know what's
popular.
frustrating about that? Because I'm also in the middle of like my umpteenth Voyager rewatch because Voyager's always been my favorite Star Trek for a lot of reasons. I know it's not the best, it's still my favorite. Um, is that like Jerry Ryan is acting circles around everyone else's Seven of Nine. She's amazing. And just it's so frustrating to me that it's like I know she was brought on for the ratings and
And
put in
that's
that
something
cat
that
suit for the
happens
ratings, but she's
so
such a
often.
good character.
That's something that happens so often. It was the same with Jolene Blalock on
Yeah,
Enterprise. She's such an amazing actress, and she
really
actually
quick.
quit acting after it
Oh
because
God.
of the environment. But she's
Oh
such an amazing actress. She was brought in as eye candy. Jerry Ryan brought in as eye candy. Suddenly, everyone discovers, oh my God, she's an amazing actress.
yeah, and I
Basically,
wish more
every
people
female
talked about
character
that.
on Battlestar Galactica,
Like,
they're all such amazing actresses, and when they hired them, they just, oh yeah, she looks pretty, let's make her a Cylon. But then, oh my God, she can act. And then they all developed in amazing ways. And I think these shows had the foresight that, okay, the execs want the eye candy, but we know how to make something out of it.
yeah, no, like Jerry Ryan is she did just some absolutely beautiful character work with Seven of
Yes.
Nine, and
Yes.
I don't know. I feel defensive of her. Like I want
I
people to
blame
talk
the
about that
writing
more.
rather than Jerry Ryan, because I mean Tom Paris was a character I didn't care for, and B'Elanna felt like a wasted character until a thing started between them. And then they started getting scenes written for them to be interesting, and and together they became far more than either one of them was apart.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I love Doctor Who, but some of the showrunners, I just did not like their storylines. I didn't like I didn't like the plots. I didn't like the way they wrote their story, that they told the story. I didn't like what they did with the characters. So I sort of paused. I watched the first season with Jodie Whittaker, and I didn't like the writing. I didn't like whatever
That's
had been
fine.
done.
This
It
Yeah,
wasn't for you.
yeah,
That's my
Totally fine.
experience with almost every Doctor Who. It's the same thing that I start watching it because I love the actor or the actress seems interesting or the
yeah,
premise seems interesting. And I watch maybe a season and a half, and then the writing completely loses me to the point where I'm like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And then they're like, okay, here's Peter Capaldi. And I'm like, okay, now you're
yes,
talking. And I start watching Peter Capaldi, and Peter Capaldi is amazing. But after half a season, I can't watch it anymore because it's melting my brain of how stupid it is. And
Jodie
then I'm like,
Whittaker had two big disservices in her first season, and one of them doesn't get talked about much. It's the cinematography. And
yes,
you
hmm,
notice this once you start realizing every time she and the companions have a discussion, it's them standing around in a circle and the camera moving around them in a circle. And there's just no variety, there's no interest. They're not, dividing up the characters in different ways to have separate
yep,
adventures. It's everyone does everything as a group and they're standing in a circle and having a discussion.
hmm.
And the other one was for her first season. They made the same mistake that they'd made back in classic Doctor Who in season 8, I think it was, which was that the answer for every story was the same. Oh, the humans are the real monsters this week. And then the next week, oh, the humans are the real monsters this week. And that doesn't work for an entire season of stories. You have to have some variety.
yeah,
Okay,
that's it.
I hate
Doctor
to
Who also
interrupt.
had, sorry.
Sorry, we have 2 minutes until the next panel.
Yep,
Yeah.
So I need to start transition, Pamela, and I need to start transitioning. As much as like I am enjoying this discussion and would love to talk for like 3 more hours with all of you. But I hope some of you can come back for the panel after next, which we're going to build a sci-fi literature syllabus.
ooh,
Oh yeah,
I
can
may
I
still
be
do
might
that.
be
available.
asleep by then, but if
That's
It's
not,
fair. But if you're still awake,
yeah.
come
I
join us.
can do this. Yeah, I can come back. Okay.
I never
Cool.
wanted people to have insomnia, but right now I kind of do. All right, we do
I
need to
have more
kick you
notes
out.
written down than we can discuss.
We love all of you, but we need to kick you out for the next panel.
All right, bye
Okay,
bye.
bye all.
Bye.